This is part 2 of Forbidden Knowledge. If you haven't watched part 1 of this particular episode, then go look for it. It should be right next to this file, wherever you found it. So, I'm not going to tell you what I said in the first episode. If you're too lazy to go watch it, then I'm just going to continue. So what else do we know? Well, we were talking about birds. And, if a bird felt sick, not like a pet bird, just, a bird, a backyard bird, or a bird from the field. If they weren't feeling well, they're not told, just fly to your local vet and a human will look after you, give you antibiotics. And we were talking about how human immune systems don't seem to be terribly good. I mean, doesn't seem to work very well to stop you from getting the common cold or flu or infections if you cut yourself. Even though we have an immune system, a mammalian immune system, it just seems really weird we'd have an immune system that doesn't seem to work at all. And birds, wild birds, don't come to see the veterinarian to get antibiotics. But humans go to get antibiotics, and sometimes they get antibiotics even though the doctor says, well, you've got a cold virus and an antibiotic won't work, or something. And, we're told that human food animals, like cows, beef cattle, or milk cows, or chickens are fed enormous quantities of antibiotics to help them grow. Then we're told if, too many people take antibiotics, then superbugs become immune to the antibiotic. And we're told, this comes up every few years, that it's a big problem that we don't have enough antibiotics for superbugs. And yet we're told, whenever we're told every, 5 years or something, that, they're still using a lot of antibiotics that are used on humans, and they're using them in our food supply. It just seems like there's a lot of stupidity. Why did the scientists tell us that the farm animals shouldn't be using human antibiotics, and then 5 years later we hear, oh, they've been still using that. It's like, why did they tell us this on the news? Why don't the journalists go and hold the politicians' feet to the fire and say, we've heard this going on 50 years, that the animals shouldn't be treated with antibiotics to help them grow because it leads to superbugs. Well, that was a previous president or governor or prime minister. That wasn't me, and I'll get right on that. They never really get on that. It's like, 3 weeks ago, I'd noticed that there was some graffiti on the telephone company's box at the end of the street. It was a new box. It was put in the past year, brand new box, and somebody went by with a black marker and put graffiti all over it. So I took a picture of it, and I emailed the phone company. I told them exactly where this box was and what the box number was. And I didn't get a response until a few days later, and someone said, we'll tell somebody about it and get it cleaned. And 3 weeks later, it's not cleaned. So it's kind of like that. These things just seem to keep falling through the cracks because everyone is unreliable, especially the politicians. And the scientists, it's not like they see this big thing on the news about antibiotics in beef cattle or something, and they don't have a lobby group that keeps lobbying journalists. You got to keep following up on this. Have the politicians passed a law yet to stop this from happening? No, it never happens. And the journalists are very flighty, means stupid. They're incredibly stupid. Among the stupidest people on the planet. If you're really dumb, if you've got a very low IQ, the first thing they're going to tell you is you should be a reporter. because reporters are incredibly dumb. They can't remember the story they made yesterday. So, if they made a big to-do about whatever it was, they'll never remember. And you may get a follow-up story, you may not. But pretty much you don't till like 5 years later. And then, that reporter might have moved on by now. But, the story of the immune system is seagulls, well, they go to dumps and they eat garbage food. It's human garbage. It's been sitting in the hot sun for days or weeks, and the seagull will peck through the garbage bag right through to whatever food it can smell, horrible rotten food that would turn your stomach, and the seagull eats it. And then the seagull shits all over, and it walks in its own shit. And you would think, well, this must be an enormous high bacterial count. And the seagull's eating this high bacteria, and its feet are covered in this high bacteria, and yet the seagull doesn't get sick. It's got a bulletproof immune system. Seagulls don't get sick, and they eat stuff that you couldn't even go near because the smell would make you retch. Why is it that the seagulls got such a strong immune system and humans don't? Don't look at me. I can't tell you. Someone doing research on this? Might have been at some point. Somebody must have wondered. I'm pretty sure that they did. I just never see any reports on it. That's the problem with the news, is they never really give you good, in-depth stories about research. They give you a quick, 30-second blurb that, some big pharmaceutical company hasn't even published this study in a journal, medical journal, but, they put out a press release and we've got to get it on the news right away because, this pharmaceutical company buys a lot of advertising for us that you'll watch, when the commercial break comes up. And so basically we got to give them a freebie. But, anyways, this is how you're trained to believe that you have DNA in your cells, and we don't know how DNA really works with quantum physics. But, we're told that quantum physics is still pretty new. Early 1900s was discovered, and physical sciences were discovered before that. I always say it's Newtonian physics, it's physical physics, which was like at least 200 years before quantum physics, and that's what biology seems to be based upon. Physical physics, not quantum physics. But you never really know, because I don't really know anybody who's doing research on quantum biology or quantum chemistry. You'd think they would, but we never had a course in quantum biology when I took biology at university, certainly not at high school, and we never had quantum chemistry. We had something called a magnetic resonance in chemistry, MRI, maybe it was, magnetic resonance, but you had to take the advanced course, and I didn't take it. And then they had to read these graphs. Modern day, a computer would do all the graph reading for you and tell you what you're looking at. Modern day, the machines tell you what you're found. Who builds the machine? No one really understands. Who builds the machines? No one really understands how the tests come about. If they're going to give you a test for this or that. In the old days, it was sent to a laboratory where you expected some technician went to school to learn how to do these in-depth tests. But these days, it comes in a kit. Maybe it comes from Turkey or China or South Africa or Zimbabwe, or it comes from Brazil, or it comes from General Motors or something, because sometimes these big corporations that make cars all of a sudden start, and they make cars, General Motors, and then maybe it wasn't General Motors, but somebody like that. They were, known for making cars, and then all of a sudden we hear a report that they've, changed their product lines, and instead of making Chevy Corvettes, they're making face masks. Face masks, they changed the assembly line from making Corvettes, and now they're making face masks. And our local brewery that's used to making beer retooled their breweries so that they could make alcohol hand sanitizer. I guess they take a lot of beer and they've got to distill the beer and get the alcohol out of it, and then they have to get a new line, that's going to take, I guess they get an order of plastic bottles from China or someplace with a, one of those tops that you push down and it makes the liquid come out. So, they get an enormous shipment from, because usually these things are made in China. At one time, plastics were made in North America. There was Husky. They made plastic injection moldables. And I know in southern Ontario somewhere that they had a place, but I don't know if they'd make anything like that anymore. Nevertheless, the brewery now makes, hand sanitizer out of a brewery. And, who does the distillation? They had to find a room and get a distillation machine, and then they had to have another machine that, unless they're doing it by hand, somehow they're by hand pouring this alcohol made from beer and pouring it into a bottle, and then they have to put a label on it. Is it a hand-drawn label, or is it, made on a laser printer with sticky? And then, there's a news release that said the local brewery is retooled and now they're making hand sanitizer. I haven't actually seen this hand sanitizer. I'm pretty sure I heard this news item, though. Just seems like my last talk, I was talking about smoke screens. Other people just call this a web of lies. I don't know. I didn't go down to our local brewery to go and check out their line where they're making this hand sanitizer, and I certainly didn't fly to one of the General Motors plants to go and see if they're actually making plastic face masks there on the Corvette assembly line. Seagulls eating disgusting rotten food and walking around in their own bird shit. They don't get sick. Humans have a bad immune system, and we're told we have to get a flu shot every year, even though the flu shot pretty much doesn't work. And now we're being told that, they're working very diligently on a COVID-19 vaccine, even though for years and years and years we've been told that there is no vaccine for the common cold. But we're told that somehow coronavirus is, COVID-19 was originally called coronavirus. So if you look that up, that's, the common cold is a coronavirus. And maybe this COVID-19 is a common cold crossed with a SARS virus, crossed with an HIV virus. But this wasn't created in a lab. This was created because in China they were eating cream of bat soup, Campbell's soup. Campbell's makes cream of bat soup in China. They go to a raw food market where people have brought bats that they captured out of cages, and they're sitting there. They're still wet. There's still blood. I'm not sure if it's because they're vampire bats and it's coming out of their fangs, or they slit the throats of these cute little bats and they're lying there for food, and then the soup company comes along and buys bats, and somehow the bats had this horrible virus that was part common cold, part SARS, and part HIV, and somehow the bat created it inside its own body. It created these viruses that people ate in cream of bat soup, and somehow it became a worldwide pandemic. That's only one version of the story, though. COVID-19 came from bats.